like it. I like it. Hey, welcome from God's long lost mitten. We got a new Supreme Court nominee. We got some problems in Ukraine, surprise, surprise, and a little bit of an issue right here on the home front that we'd love to highlight. But first off, Miss Monica, how you doing today?
Oh, I am doing great. I mean, another sick kiddo home with us today.
Yes,
so
it is an ongoing thing, a pandemic, if you will.
Spreads from one household member to another.
Oh boy, I'm still coughing, so don't hate here.
Yes, but yeah, I'm looking forward to discussing all of these wonderful current events.
Wonderful things. Go ahead, since it's the first time. Did you like that little intro?
I did.
Nice? It was pretty nice. It's nice. Okay.
New morning intro.
Let's go ahead and let's hop into that first story.
Well, first, let's remind everybody, if you like what you've seen, and especially now that we have our microphones set up to not cause that horrible echo, I apologize.
This is an ongoing thing. We are working on it, but this isn't a studio. This is, well, I mean, I guess technically anything's a studio, but this isn't on what you would consider a professional level. We are but just a nice, humble, small town couple that love talking about this junk in the news.
Yes, and if you like to hear more, if you want to send us some content ideas, we'd love to review everything. But as always, make sure that you are smashing that like button and subscribing so that we can continue to make this content.
Absolutely. I mean, we will regardless, but support's always nice. So, interestingly enough, and we mentioned this yesterday, the Republicans are actually focusing on Jackson's positions on terrorists. Adult offenders, is that the PC way to say that, you say?
Well, the non-YouTube banning way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess for the moment we have to care about that. If you're on Rumble, just say whatever you want. Anyways, as nomination hearing opens, now we saw Senator Josh Hawley. He's brought this up from weeks ago, and he made it very clear he wanted everyone to know that this is where looking forward to the answers as to why Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, her record involving individuals who engage in adult acts involving children, I guess is a disgustingly PC way to say it, why she's being so lenient on them. And he went into it in detail. We'll get to that in a second. And you know what? It's been a second. Let's check it out. So Republicans are stressing the need to closely review Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's record as the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to begin hearings on Monday for the first black woman nominated to the Supreme Court. GOP is now already facing accusations of racism from outlets such as Garbage, and More Garbage for questioning whether Jackson should be confirmed. That's the Daily Cost, Slate, and Vanity Fair. I will go ahead and say it. Jackson's been criticized for her vehement. Oh, man, so close. Defense of terrorism suspects as a public defender.
Who knows? I'm probably saying it wrong.
Well, yours sounds better than mine, so we'll stick with it. She has also faced concerns over a paper she wrote in the 1990s criticizing excessiveness in punishments for offenders of an adult nature. Interestingly enough, here we go. So we won't hop down. Josh Hawley's quotes are down here. But like they say right here, Senator Ted Cruz said earlier this month that some in the GOP leadership are instructing members to avoid a fight over Jackson as memories of the brutal confirmation hearing for Justice Brett Kavanaugh are still fresh. And it's not just Brett Kavanaugh. Amy Coney Barrett, they dragged her family through the mud. They had everybody everywhere making fun of every aspect of them, calling them the worst things ever. I mean, they made poor Brett Kavanaugh out to be just a wandering predator in his young days, and the guy kept a journal, he kept a calendar, he was able to show exactly what he was doing. The guy was a geek. Let's just say it. The guy was a geek, and that's okay. That's okay. It showed he had his judicial record is what should have been examined. So I will start off by saying, as much as I loathe the Republican Party, for the most part, I do always like that they try to maintain civility. Which, of course, as we've discussed, can be quite frustrating because, as we've seen, the other side gives us nothing like that.
It can. And when you're the one who, for better or worse, feels the need to extend the olive branch. And I know it is so hard to not be petty. But let's not be petty because it doesn't get us anywhere to be petty.
I understand that.
It grows the divide.
But
and we're at the point where...
I know. Be good.
Yes.
But that's the problem, though. That is the problem. I get it. You know, you never. What's that famous saying? You never want to get in a. It's like you never want to get in a fight with an idiot because they'll drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. I think that was Mark Twain. Who knows?
And they will absolutely win every time.
It could have been Albert Einstein. I understand that, but at the same time, we're just in this situation where their side has no rules. There has no decorum. There's nothing but the power they hope to achieve and any means necessary. And I understand. Yes, it's important to be better at that. Yes, it's important to be the adult, but being the adult means reprimanding that behavior. And when it's never reprimanded, it just continues.
Well, there's a difference between justification for an action and the emotional reaction that you see to things. And the way that the extreme right is spinning this, she's soft on child predators.
Yep.
Okay, well, if you look at the course of what she's doing, and they listed a lot of her stuff, but if you look at where she comes up from, so she, the Washington Post article says she's one of the only judges who've served as a public defender.
Right.
And I think it was something like only 3% of all judges across the country have done that type of work. Well, you get a different perspective from that type of work. It's just like anybody who worked in the service industry views the service industry differently than people who don't.
And I understand what you're saying, but I must remind you, yes, it is important that as a public defender, potentially that as a public defender, sorry, my word jumbles in my mind here, you are exposed to lower things. You have to work from the ground up, that kind of thing. You are essentially on the corporate dime, or not on the corporate dime. You're on the government's dime. So you're not working through victory in a sense. You're essentially a government employee. And just like we've seen with the education system, and by and large, government roles in general is results are not expected. You know. Is in the private sector, if you're a lawyer in the private sector, you got to be good. You got to have moral. No, you don't have to morals. That was funny. I almost said that because they were talking about lawyers. You have to be good and you have to aim to win. Whereas public defenders are notoriously either one of two things. Either they are the little guy fighting against whomever, you know, like the Matt Murdocks, or, well, they are like these individuals that we're trying to get out of the education system who are injecting themselves. And in this case, this could be a situation where does her experience give her the ability to say, I let these people off, and we'll get into it. Josh Hawley does list the examples. I let these people off even though what they did was, because, I mean, she was undercutting the minimum sentencing for these heinous crimes.
But here's the thing.
By a lot.
We have to look at that record and determine, and this is why they have these hearings, without bias, without thinking of Brett Kavanaugh, without thinking of Amy Coney Barrett. We have to look at that record and say, was she doing these things to sway the way that the justice system works in favor of some type of special interest or some agenda? Or was she working within the justice system and saw things that were unjust and bringing the rulings back down because it seemed like it was a more fair and balanced approach?
I like your glasses half full approach to this. I love it. But consider the hill that she would choose to die on, a hill involving adult activities involving minors.
No, that is...
It is.
No, that is what the media has brought to the attention.
Well, that's what Josh Hawley brought to the attention. He listed, I think it was like 7 to 10 cases just from his initial research.
But if you look at her stats on how she's prosecuted, like how she's made decisions, I don't think that it's just this one subject that she's soft on. I think that her history.
The Guantanamo thing too.
Bring that one up because I don't know.
Oh, sure, we'll get to it. She basically has been soft on Guantanamo Bay detainees.
Okay.
And, I understand what you're saying.
But
I really do.
Maybe she's soft across the board.
Is that somebody... Excuse me, wow. Is that somebody that soft across the board that you would want on the Supreme Court?
Not from my political stance.
Exactly.
But I can understand how someone who feels like the system is broken, whether or not they have the evidence to back that up. Someone who really, truly feels like the system is broken and is punishing a demographic more would want that because it would become softer across the board.
I would argue the most important thing as an adult, especially an adult in a position of power, has to do is to be able to discern between what we feel is right and what we know is right.
It goes back to how these leaders raise their children. When their children run off and do these horrible things, do they make them own up to it? Or do they cover up for them and let them get away with it?
That's a good point. And I mean, we're having, like we talked about before the show started, there are Soros-backed DAs across this country that are making lives just absolutely miserable for their constituents because it's basically a revolving door for a lot of these what they call lesser crimes. Like, I mean, obviously the most famous is like in California, if you steal under $1,000 worth of stuff, they're just not even going to do anything. They're like, all right, go get out of here. Get out of here, you rapscallions.
But here's the thing. We're starting to see that financially is not something that the economy can stabilize.
Whoa. Are you telling me letting everyone take whatever they want out of stores doesn't yield a profit?
Yes. Just like I'm telling you, letting your child throw a fit and giving them a reward every time after they've done that behavior is going to encourage that behavior. There's no natural consequence here. It used to be that the natural consequence was you broke the law, you went to jail. And then we started going, but is that really fair?
Oh, see, that was the problem when those little worms got in there.
Because there are situations where you feel horrible for the person. Like Aladdin. Aladdin technically is a thief. But do we feel sorry for him?
I mean, I would feel sorry for him if the head guard had his hands as a trophy. But that's a different era and a different area.
Well, it's the same thing here. We're raised on these ideas that the people who are bad people aren't necessarily a bad person. You have to see it from their perspective.
So basically,
obviously, if you're starving, you're going to steal.
You're going to go Wreck-It Ralph, you know. Just because you're a bad guy doesn't mean you're a bad guy. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, well, I'm going to pause this right here. We have gone right off the beaten path. I'm going to pull it back right now and just say, you're right. Civility is important. And I really just want to emphasize, since I know the first thing that's going to happen is people are going to say, you know, if anyone ever references how just absolutely terribly the Democrats behaved during the Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett hearings, you know, I mean, you want to talk about insurrection. As I recall, they stormed the building and like had a sit-in and took over the entire. I mean, it got nuts. Look at the clips of that. But the point is, I really want to emphasize that in case anyone ever says, the party switched, we didn't do that. It's always their excuse when you bring up their past behavior and show the blatant hypocrisy of it. Back to the article, because you're right. I could go on about this all day. Okay, back to the article. So, okay, we're going to move past the Brett Kavanaugh thing. We're just going to skim down to Senate Judiciary member Josh Hawley has been criticized by some on the left for his vocal scrutiny of Jackson's stance on offenders of adult nature. Quote, Judge Jackson has yet to address her alarming record on activities
of adulting
nature involving minors. You see it right there. Hawley tweeted on Friday, but rather than ask hard questions, the Washington Post is regurgitating White House talking points. Oh, no. Oh, here we go. So I'm going to open this. Yes, I'm going to. Hold on a second. I'm going to hop over here to you and I for a hot second. I'm opening up this Josh Hawley's Twitter thread. I just have to change it real quick. If you are like me and you
have to change his Twitter
I do, yes. I have to what I do is I open the source code and I change words and then I show the page again and then people go, "Wow, he said that?"
That makes way more sense.
Here's what I did. I changed it to knitter.net. Because if you're like me and you hate Twitter, if you replace twitter.com with knitter.net, Nitter.net, it'll display everything without any of the Twitter fluff. It's a nice little tool. Just going to lay out. So anywho, he tweeted out, this is on March 16th. So I guess it wasn't a couple weeks ago. It was just last week. But still, he gave her heads up. He said he's been researching the record of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson regarding reading her opinions, articles, interviews, and speeches. He says, I've noticed an alarming pattern when it comes to Judge Jackson's treatment of offenders of that nature, especially those preying on children. There's a pattern of letting these people off the hook for their appalling crimes, both as a judge and a policymaker, advocating for it since law school. This goes beyond, quote, soft on crime. I'm concerned that this is a record that endangers our children, and that is where my concern came up, too. And, I mean, he goes through this, and let's see here. I'm trying to make it big enough so you can read it, too. I mean, he goes through it, and this is, like he said, as far back as law school. I mean, Judge Jackson is questioned making convicts register as offenders, saying it leads to, quote, stigmatization and ostracism. She suggested public policy is driven by a, quote, climate of fear, hatred, and revenge against these offenders. And I mean, we can go on and on, but the real point is he really outlines all of this, her history of it, to the point where I would say, especially if it goes all the way back to law school, predating her experience in there, it doesn't, I'm not going to say it dispels your argument because, like you said, you go into law school knowing what you want to do. And like you said, she could come from a perspective of, I want to change the system because, insert reason here, I believe it, or I see someone. It. Exactly. So your theory still stands, but this is consistent. This is consistently down the line of, from day one, this is her thing. So since we know it involves, or at least has a tendency to involve crimes involving children, knowing that, would you still say, well, you're idealistic, and I respect that?
We don't know that it has a tendency to involve crimes involving children. We know that that's what they're benchmarking and that's what they're referencing to prove their case.
Yep.
But like I said, she could be just as easy on someone who's involved in theft. You know,
yes.
she could just cut the sentencing and feel like repealing some of the punishment is the best way.
Does that sound like someone you want on the Supreme Court?
Not from our perspective.
Not from our perspective.
But it goes down to the way that you parent your kids.
Yes, and we can talk about that, as a motivating factor after the fact. But in this moment,
I really truly believe, and I would love to hear her speak more to why she made these decisions, and that's exactly what. I'm sorry, I can't think of his name.
That's okay.
Whoever it was that was bringing this up.
Josh Hawley?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's exactly what he said. You're right. He even said, I didn't do this as a gotcha. I gave her a week ahead. He even said he had met her, because we did watch the clip from the hearing.
Yeah.
He had met her. He had talked with her. He liked her. She was very well
spoken.
Yep.
And she was very well educated.
Yep.
So instead of turning this into a moment of digging your heels in and hating someone just because they were nominated by a side in a position that you don't agree in.
No one said that, but go on.
No. But that's what a lot of these
of course
papers are trying to turn this
into. The media outlets are just going to spout Democratic propaganda. Yes, we're discounting all that.
We need to take a hard look at her and why she has the judgments that she has, and decide if that's a good fit for how we want rulings in this country to go. Because that's exactly what our judicial system does, is it interprets things within a range. And if we swing it more towards the left, it interprets it within that range. And if we swing it more towards the right, then it interprets it within that range.
Just very much like the culture war. I mean, you're right. You're right. Politics is downstream from culture. That's I believe that's a famous Andrew Breitbart quote. And it's 100% correct.
Yeah, and look at the way, so yes, the Supreme Court, because of nominations, was swinging a little more conservative. Now it's going to, because of the current president and what's happening, it's going to swing a little bit more to the liberal side. And what we can do is, instead of alienating that liberal side, open up the dialogue and have the discussion so that they understand that even though they view things a certain way, doesn't mean that everybody that they're representing views it that way. And that maybe their judgments need to go more towards the middle.
That is fair. See, should have you on these committees, man. Interestingly enough, and the last part of this I'm going to read, because we kind of hit the majority of this article that I wanted to touch on, is to lead into the next article. Senate Judiciary Chairman Dick Durbin from Illinois called Hawley, quote, part of the fringe within the Republican Party in response to the Missouri senator's questioning. He says, this was a man who was fist-bumping the murderous mob who descended on the Capitol on January 6th of the last year, Durbin told ABC on Sunday. He doesn't have the credibility he thinks he does. Well, interestingly enough, I'll tell you what, where are we here? You know what? No, we'll get to that in a second. Actually, this does lead me to the next one because this is from Breitbart. The left invokes QAnon after Josh Hawley exposes Ketanji Brown Jackson's soft record on adult offenders involving children.
This is again.
This is the problem.
Another reach at let's alienate the sides from each other instead of bringing people back to that middle ground of no. There's not people who, I mean, obviously there are people who believe that there's lizard people, but then there's a bunch of us who like to joke around about there being lizard people and how cold their wives' hands are.
It's true. You can really tell because, well, you know, you get under the warmest blankets possible and they don't heat up and then they go, give me your heat. But hey, that's a story for another day.
And sometimes that could just be an iron deficiency.
Yes, it could be an iron deficiency. Lizard people are real. But more importantly,
the thing is when you take someone, and we have family and friends who are on the more liberal side of things.
Oh, of course. I mean, everybody does.
I'm sure
the village cook
view us as down the rabbit hole conspiracy theorists. Oh my gosh, doomsday preppers. And everybody has their own level of comfort with it. And we have to stop being so extreme about everything because this just cracks me up that now the left is going to go, well, you're only bringing this up because you think that there's a conspiracy to get somebody onto the Supreme Court that's going to allow pedophilia.
Better be careful with your keywords there.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
It's going to allow minor attractive persons. All right, there goes YouTube. But anyways, minor attracted persons. But no, you're 100% correct. And it is justifiable because now we're just seeing, and you may say it's tinfoil, and I'll partially agree with you, but there's a pattern here. The reaction to the parental rights education bill, just the reaction or how they're treating students and parents, and across the country, we're seeing problems involving children. And there's, again, I'm going to quote anyone I can here, there's that famous saying, socialists don't have children, they have your children. And so it's very important to be involved in these things. And lately, it seems like they have really turned their sights to children. So when Biden, who has his own skeletons piling up involving children, when he nominates someone who the first thing that stands out is a record of soft crime involving people involved in these crimes involving children, I'm trying to be as vague as I can here. You kind of can't help but go, okay, so you remember those conspiracy theories from, like, I don't know, 3 months ago that turned out to be right? What if this is one of them?
No, and I totally get that, but this just feeds into it is a pattern, but it's a pattern in the way that they believe people will react.
Oh yeah, this is definitely this is, I'm gonna use their own words, this is essentially a dog whistle for their people who want to hear, like, oh, they're crazy QAnon people, oh, I don't even need to listen anymore. I don't need to listen to this Josh Hawley guy. They hear the whistle. They go, oh, that's who he is. I don't need to care. The thing because
they're trying to alienate the other side and say, no, the right people, you guys aren't allowed to be moderate. You aren't allowed to even consider this.
Yep.
And both sides need to stop being so sensationalist because this. I was thinking about it today and how crazy, because now that we're older, we're living through the movies about high school. You remember, like, the She's All That's and the Mean Girls and all this, where there's definitive cliques and where everybody can be and where they can hang out.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. Like social groups.
And if you look back at when those movies were made and the way that high schools functioned.
The 90s were a great time.
But to be truly in high school in that time?
Okay, yeah.
They were dramatizations.
Yes.
And they were dramatizations that were funny because we did not live through that every day.
True.
But now we've, as a society, decided that is normal. That the OC is how a normal high school function life should be. And you have to be on one side of things or the other.
Well,
life is very rarely ever so black and white.
Very true, but the mainstream media is the ones who are pushing these. Most of the people have just tuned it out. I mean, look at their ratings. Their ratings are collapsing, so they're pushing these fringe theories at the behest of a very small minority.
Well, and they're getting more extreme because they have clickbait.
Exactly.
They're competing with all of the other crazy articles out there.
They have to feed the algorithm, and I mean, there's a lot of problems to keep an eye on, but the biggest thing I say whenever anyone says anything about QAnon, it's like I answer it the same way that President Trump answered it when that weird she-witch asked him during the debate, when she said, your followers believe that the elites are, and she started naming off what are the stereotypical QAnon theories about eating children and whatnot. Who knows, man? That's a rabbit hole that I won't even jump in. However, his response...
Maybe someday if we have Alex Jones on the show,
oh my God, if I ever meet Alex Jones, then yes. We'll talk about the craziest things possible.
But fangirl out for a minute.
He answered, and he said, well, they seem to be against, individuals who prey on minors, and I would say that's a good cause. That was all he said.
Yes.
And that's all he said. And I'm like, you know what? I agree. If the Venn diagram of me and QAnon overlaps on we don't like people who prey on children, I guess I align a little bit with them. Well, there's your soundbite. Anywho, let's reel this back into the article. So, let me bring it back up here. Okay, so, quote, Judge Jackson has a pattern of letting children... Okay, wait, hold on a second. This is... Oh, yeah. So, we already know about this one from the other one. So, in an 18-tweet thread, Hawley laid out questionable rulings and comments from Jackson regarding offenders of minor nature. However, despite Hawley's valid concerns as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, where Jackson's confirmation hearings will take place, corporate media has used Hawley's concern to liken him to QAnon and Pizzagate. Oh, man. Those are two things. No, I shouldn't say two things. The words Pizzagate, yeah, don't ever look into that, because as crazy as it sounds, the details that line up are even crazier. Again, this is going into Hunter Biden laptop territory, so just avoid it. Trust me, you'll get on a list if you're not protected.
There are horrible people doing horrible things in the world at any given time.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the best way to look at it. I mean, there's horrible people out there, and sometimes you just for a moment you shine a light on them, and then you're like, why did I do that? But yeah. Anywho, this is the reaction that they have, and like you said, we have to stop being so extremist. And our media especially has to learn that lesson. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to learn it anytime soon, because that's where their bread and butter has been the last 5 or 6 years. You would think the lesson of CNN collapsing would show them, hey, that doesn't work anymore. People don't care anymore. But exactly. They got to do what they got to do. However, hopping over to the Daily Mail article up next, this is actually, we get a chance to hear some responses from her. She says, quote, nothing could be further from the truth. Biden SCOTUS pick Ketanji Brown Jackson rejects claim she's soft in child cases, says sentencing guidelines are, quote, outdated, and won't say whether she backs court packing. Now,
so that goes to prove the point that she does feel like sentencing guidelines are outdated. She feels like the system is not working, and she has a perspective from being a public defender. So whether she's right or wrong about it, I would like to hear what her perspective is on that.
Oh, I agree. Let's see. It said she issued a passionate defense of her history of child sentencing. As Judiciary Chairman Dick Durbin gave the Supreme Court nominee a chance to address Republican criticism, claiming she is too soft on these crimes. Where is the exact quote here? The Democratic senator from Illinois was teaming up with defense for Jackson by allowing her to address the cases, whereas her judiciary, blah, 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 blah. She said, quote, I am not importing my personal views on policy preferences. She ensured. That's it? That's all she said? Hold on. Durbin said at the start of the second day of Jackson's confirmation hearing on Tuesday, the issue involving child, blah, 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 blah. I went to turn to that issue because, okay, he asked Jackson how she felt knowing that her children, husband, and the world heard Republican Senator Josh Hawley accuse her of endangering children with the sentence of, it's very interesting because Senator Hawley brings up a great point, and the way he brings it up is perfect. He meets her, he looks at her history, and he says, all right, I like you as a person. However, here's my list of grievances. We'll talk about them at the hearing. And how do they respond? He attacked you. He declared these things to the world. It's projection because, of course, if it were the other way around, we'd hear about it today as they threw whatever subject they wanted to, because it wouldn't be this one, of course, right in the nominee's face if they were Republican. It's a very interesting parallel between the rules for thee and not for me, like how they treat one of their nominees versus how they treat one of the Republican nominees. But she said, quote, as a mother and a judge who has had to deal with these cases, I was thinking that nothing could be further from the truth. Image. Here we go. Quote, these are some of the most difficult cases that a judge has to deal with because we're talking about pictures of abuse of children. We're talking about graphic descriptions that judges have to read and consider when they decide how to sentence in these cases. She continued in an impassioned defense of her judicial record. Okay, here we go. Quote, these people are looking at 20, 30, 40 years of supervision, she said of offenders. They can't use their computers in a normal way for decades. I'm imposing all of those constraints because I understand how significant, how damaging, how horrible this crime is. I impose a significant sentence, she assured, but said she is limited as a judge by what Congress has decided judges can do with cases. She has also said that as a judge, she is limited by what Congress... She just said that. Why'd they put that twice? She's limited as a judge by what Congress has decided. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I lost my mind there. Quote, there's a...
They redid their own...
Yeah, they said the same thing over again. Yeah. There's a statute that tells judges what they're supposed to do, she detailed. Congress has decided what it is that a judge has to do when this and any other cases when they sentence. And that statute doesn't say, look only at the guidelines and stop. The statute doesn't say, impose the highest possible penalty for this sickening and egregious crime. The statute says, calculate the guidelines, but also look at various aspects of this offense and impose a sentence that is sufficient but not greater than necessary to promote the purposes of punishment. She also said that precedent with sentencing in these cases are outdated because they derive from a time when there wasn't the internet and it was based on the volume of images offenders would receive in the mail. You kind of had me until that last bit.
I don't know. So
I mean, that's a weird way to be like, it's actually because, it's the internet now. It's easier.
Well, so Jackson said the structure of the sentencing guidelines is not doing the work of differentiating who is a more serious offender in the way that it used to. I would actually agree with that.
Whoa. All right, go on. Let's hear it.
Well, and this comes from personal experience of knowing someone who was charged because he was 18 at the time, and the girl was not.
Ooh, yeah. Those are really weird situations, especially when they're both in high school. I'm sorry, go on.
Exactly.
You're right. Those are weird.
And it's one of those instances of, is this a person who had malicious intent? Is this a person who had an open and mutual relationship with someone? And were they both old enough to consent? And the laws and the rules and stuff have been changed over time, and some states have 16 as the age of consent within this range, and 18 is the age. So you really, really have to look at what law you're interpreting.
Yep.
And the individual case. And we don't know anything about these individual cases. So saying what they would recommend for a punishment and then looking at the particulars of the case, maybe her use of the guidelines was within reason.
It's giving her a lot of credit, but it is fair. And that is, you're right. The judicial system should relearn to be fair.
And it could be because she was in an area where she saw more of those cases that kind of got grouped into harsher punishments, but weren't necessarily... It's that gray area that we talk about. That is so hard to say.
It is hard. It is, and it's very difficult because right now it almost sounds to me like you're describing the judicial system as a whole, which I adamantly agree with. Yes. But then we have to remember the actual subject we're discussing, and suddenly I have to go, wait, okay, I guess technically yes, that applies, and technically details could apply, but this is about the worst thing you can do.
Well, but here's the thing. Do they is what we need to find out.
Man. It's a tough conversation, that's for sure.
The fact that everybody's framing this as a political side, one or the other, instead of does this person fit the bill? Okay, so she might have been nominated because she's a black woman.
Yep.
We need to be able to look past that.
Oh, and I understand that. We know that's the case because that was literally Joe Biden's campaign promise. So we know that's why she was nominated. But like you said, I look past that just like Holly did and say, let's look at her record.
Exactly.
No one cares about the checkboxes that the left loves so much. We care about vetting these people. And you're right. I mean, this hearing is obviously going really well because they're just vetting her. And that's all it ever should be. However, it's not without its fair share of shenanigans, which brings us to our next article. We were just talking about a Mr. Dick Durbin. Quote, a lot of hiding. Senators kept from seeing sentencing commission records on Supreme Court nominee. Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Dick Durbin is, quote, hiding records from Ketanji Brown Jackson's time as vice chair of the Sentencing Commission, where she championed leniency for predators of minors, says Michael Davis, former chief counsel for the committee.
See, this is where
this thing's going to be a lot. Do you have this article open?
Yes.
All right, go ahead and start reading. I hear Duders. Just a moment.
The Biden administration is keeping more than 48,000 pages of records about Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson from senators reviewing her nomination, including documents about her time at the U.S. Sentencing Commission that she has made a central part of her professional story. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin is hiding records from Jackson's time as vice chair of the Sentencing Commission, where she championed leniency
for these individuals.
Yep. Chuck Grassley, a Republican from Iowa, said Monday that 16,000 pages of substantive content has been released on Jackson, compared to 48,000 pages withheld by the White House under the Presidential Records Act and
Freedom of Information Act exemptions. Grassley, a ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, revealed the obstruction during his opening statement. Senate Republicans are seeking records specifically from 2010 to 2014, where Jackson served on the commission, government agency, blah, blah, blah. All right, here we go. Quote, Durbin has refused a request by Republican senators to look at her records on the Sentencing Commission. He told them, Judge Jackson's history of sentencing below guidelines, particularly in cases involving children, raises legitimate questions about her views on penalties for these crimes, Grassley said. This is exactly why I asked for her Sentencing Commission records, the same types of records that committee traditionally reviews when vetting a Supreme Court nominee. And just before we start talking about this, I'm just going to scroll down, because I can't remember if he actually said why he did it. All I know is let's see here, Judge Jackson has been maneuvering to try to lessen the punishment for whatever reason, blah, blah, blah. I don't think he did. I don't know if he didn't. So this happened, and Dick Durbin did not give a statement as to why it happened. So it looks like they just withheld 48,000 documents. That is, he said 16,000 were given, but 48,000 were withheld?
Yep. Yes.
Wow. So that's 80% of her record is now withheld?
And the fact that this is a big chunk of what her resume is made up of.
Yes. See, this, we talked about patterns earlier, and I am so happy that I saved this article for last, because you're right. Up until this point, it's very fair to say, okay, hey, calm down. Let's look at it from her perspective. Even though the subject matter is terrible, there could be a glass half full situation here. This behavior makes me worry a bit.
Well, yeah, because this speaks to, okay, if we're looking at her critically and looking at her record, is it that she's soft in specific categories because of an empathetic nature? Or is it that she's soft on crime across the board and believes that things need to be reformed, which is not what we want?
No. Either way, even with the points you've made, which are great points, I would not want this individual on the Supreme Court. We need somebody who, honestly, I think the Supreme Court, every single person on there should basically just be a constitutionalist. Because, as much hype as the Supreme Court gets, that's really what it comes down to. Otherwise, it's mostly a matter of states' rights. But once it gets to that point, the Constitution is what they should be looking at in regards to their rulings. So, I even with this individual's history so far, I haven't heard anything that's made me say I want this person on the Supreme Court. Stage one, which was she has potential empathy for individuals across the spectrum and feels that our system needs to be reformed.
Yep.
Okay, that's fine. Now stage two we've entered is, okay, well, that very well may be the case. However, you know what? We're just going to keep the records from you.
Well, and that's the thing, is that you have to prove your point. That's the whole point to having an argument, and this is a
debate.
This is the error on the side of the Dems that we fall into as Republicans or as conservatives.
It's hard to say what you say. You can say Republicans, but who knows?
This is the area that we step into where it becomes, instead of being a debate, instead of being an open discussion, it is an authoritarian, this is what we're going to do because this is what we're going to do, and you have no right to say otherwise.
It's fascistic. It's,
Yeah,
I mean,
it
it comes
really
out
is. It
and
really
the
is.
mask slips. And you know what? That's a perfect segue actually into this follow-up from the Daily Caller. They will crush you. Senator Cruz calls out Democrats for their explicitly racial filibustering of black and Hispanic nominees. He said, quote, the senior Democrats in this committee happily filibustered Judge Janice Rogers Brown, the very qualified African-American woman nominated to the D.C. Circuit, and they did so precisely because they wanted to prevent Judge Brown from becoming Justice Brown, the first African-American woman. Joe Biden was among the Democrats, the first African-American woman nominated to the D.C. Circuit. Former President George W. Bush nominated Brown in 2003, but was immediately met with opposition by Senate Democrats who argued that her reported ideological stances were, quote, out of the legal mainstream. After 2 years, she was renominated and confirmed. And then he also pointed to the Senate Democrats filibustering the nomination of Miguel Estrada, a Honduran immigrant nominated by Bush to serve on the U.S. Court of Appeals. A memo to Democrat Illinois Senator Dick Durbin, coming up again, called Estrada, quote, especially dangerous because, quote, he is Latino. According to the Washington Times? Really? According to the Washington...
That sentence doesn't read right, does it?
It doesn't. What's the link lead to? A Washington Times article from 2003. We could check it out for his full quote, but let's just go this. Okay, I'm just going to keep moving. I don't want to give Durbin the light. They were explicitly racial. If you are Hispanic or African American and you dare depart from their political orthodoxy, they will crush you, they will attack you, they will slander you, and they will filibuster you, Cruz continued. So this is not about race. And again, I mean, I got to toss it up to Mr. Cruz. 100% right. They come out and they try to say, we're nominating, President Biden has fulfilled his campaign promise to nominate an African-American woman to the Supreme Court, and if you oppose it, you are racist. And this is the same dirty tricks they've been using. I'm not even going to say it. This is the same dirty tricks they've used forever. And I hope we get to the point where Republicans are not scared. I guess I should say Republican politicians are not scared of the word racist, because it really is all they have.
Well, I think that we're already to that point because, like you said, politics follows culture. Mm-hmm. And we've gotten to the point where the majority of Americans are so sick of the race card being played, of it being a conversation all of the time. This is ridiculous. Yeah, it is like sexual identity. It's all that other PC BS.
Yep.
And I don't care.
No one cares. Well, the thing, racism was dead. Racism was dead.
Let me see those 48,000 pages on how you...
Yep. Let's vet this person.
Yes.
We shouldn't just look and say, woman, check. African American, check. Let's do this, people. No. This is the Supreme Court. You can virtue signal at your local meetup if you want, but here we need people who actually know what they're doing, and we need to vet them.
And I get the idea that, okay, the conservative side is saying, gotcha, look at this, and then the left is going, no, we're going to not show you anything. It is that childish back and forth that needs to stop, and people need to start going, okay, you know what? Let's be open and honest. Let's be transparent, and let's look at this person critically and say, are they going to be able to handle the job? And that is something that we as Americans have gotten away from. And, oh, man, is it scary.
I was going to say, we are paying for it. I mean, look at the people that look at, who's right, Pete Buttigieg, the secretary of, taking vacations. That guy, when they say he comes back after his vacation, his maternity leave, he comes back from his maternity leave, and they immediately say to him, okay, we got a crisis. What are you going to do? What can we do? And he goes, buy an electric car. Wow. I mean, these people are so out of touch because they didn't get these positions based on vetting. They weren't the best for the job. They were just
they were connected to someone.
Either they scratched backs or they fulfilled a check mark, and that's all the left, the modern left cares about. And it's honestly, like you said yesterday, it's tearing our country to shreds.
And a big part of that is the way that the universities have been allowed to hand out degrees.
Oh, man. I saw a really scary video earlier. I forget which school it was from. It was a law school, and it was a professor trying to show these results of cases and why they were. And the people were just screaming at her, saying, no, that's not right. They were this, that, and that. Basically screaming virtue points. And she was like, this is terrifying. If this is the next wave of who represents the law, we are doomed. I mean, once the doors of the colleges opened up to anyone that follows their orthodoxy and they just continue to push it, I mean, college is a sham, man. At this point, don't send your kids to college unless they have a passion, unless they know what they're going to do. Go for trade schools, get them involved in their community. I mean, I'm to that point where college it's a brainwashing facility.
Well, and it's really sad because I remember...
This is as a college graduate.
Yes.
I gotta make sure I emphasize that. I have a degree up on the wall somewhere.
Well, and I mean, you got your bachelor's, and then I turned around and stopped working my way up the corporate ladder and decided to get my bachelor's degree to make it easier because we knew that there's only so high you can climb.
Yeah, these days you'll get to that point where they say, "Do you have a degree?" And you're like, "Well, no, but I've done this job for a decade." And they're like, "Well, at this point, you have to have a degree."
Yes, and that's what's really scary, and the fact that
unless you know someone.
Well, even when you go for your degree,
right?
You know, there were so many classes that are not related to what your degree might be in that you will never use again.
Oh man, there was a curriculum released where there is actually, I'm not making this up, there's actually a social justice program. I'm sure this isn't news to you, but like for me to literally see the curriculum, I was just like, oh my God, it's not a joke, it's real.
No, and
it's not a meme.
You have someone who wants to be a business major, and you make them take something like French history or something insane that, okay, yes, I'm sure that there's 12 steps from Sunday that you can find to connect that back to their degree somehow and make it so that you can charge this outlandish amount of money and make sure that you have enough students enrolled in this class so that the interest doesn't drop. But if the interest drops in a certain subject, let it die.
Yes, you have to let these things die.
Instead, we've roped them into degrees and taught our kids and taught our generations of people that they have to be exposed to so much stuff. They don't have to learn it. They don't have to question it. They don't have to understand it.
They just have to be aware that it exists.
They have to be aware that it exists. And we've leaned away from the idea that you have to be a critical thinker in your subject area.
Ooh, dangerous times, man.
We've made the focus the least important part about the degree.
Sad but true. Really sad but true. The institutions have just been taken over by the left, and with the left, it's all ideology, and that's all it's become.
Well, and it's funny because these are the same people who say that institutions are patriarchies and
no. Those were the old institutions. Those are the old ones. All these racist systems. Oh no. Those are the old ones.
Yes.
Quick. Let's elect Joe Biden, who's been in this system since probably its inception and has done absolutely nothing but fight the system.
Or another, since he's been rebirthed into.
Yeah, let's look at. Why don't you take a look at Kamala Harris's record and let me know how the system's working there. Oh,
well,
boy.
And that's the thing is we keep promoting these things and not necessarily promoting, but not fighting them.
True. And I mean, the very fact that you and I are recording this and talking about it shows that, people, even on a small scale, like you and I have gotten to that point where it's just time to at least start talking about it and spreading the word and saying, okay, you know what? This stuff kind of needs to stop. We kind of got to get back on track here.
And we as the people need to, I know that it's frustrating because we don't want to read the sensationalist headlines. We don't want to go through all the articles. We just want to TLDR and move on with our day. People have so much media lag. Like the fatigue from it all is so intense. But we have to move past it and actually pay attention to what's going on. And I don't think a lot of people are.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Like when Russia invaded Ukraine and we were talking about it, and I said, I text 2 people the next morning and said, hey, what are you thinking about next steps? And what do you think is going to happen? And both of these people that I think are intelligent individuals responded with, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, man. And that's the worst part is, like you said, I know exactly who you're talking about. And these people, they don't have their head in the sand. They're working class people. But unfortunately, being working class means you don't have time for this crap.
And they're sick of it. Like you and I throw stuff on when we go to work out and we listen to both sides. Like I will sit through a Jen Psaki press conference.
Oh boy. Oh.
I know. I take the bullet for us on that one because I know that you absolutely hate to listen to her. But there are some things that after listening to her and hearing the way that questions were phrased or like the frustration in the news system, that you can tell things are swinging back right.
I hope you're right. I do. We are going to leapfrog real quick. I'm actually just going to hop to our very last article because I'm going to save the little nestled, which was Ukraine involved and a certain Biden slip that I thought there was something worth pointing out, but maybe a little tinfoily. So we're just going to hop to a local story here. Everybody's favorite, Governor Whitmer, jobless benefits scandal. Unvetted workers enabled to disperse $39 billion in taxpayer funds. Oh boy. So Michigan's unemployment agency relied on staffing agencies that employed 47 workers with one or more felony convictions, including embezzlement, illegal sale, and use of financial transaction devices, identity theft, and armed robbery, according to state watchdog. Good gravy. So they failed to screen 5,500 workers before giving them access to software that dispersed $39 billion in taxpayer money since March 2020. Now, what were we just talking about vetting again?
We were talking about vetting.
My goodness.
And then it comes down to whose fault was that?
Whose fault? Well, it says an audit released Friday from the Officer of Auditor General Doug Ringler marked 4, quote, material conditions, the most severe rating, asserting that UIA failed to take multiple safeguards to prevent employees from looting taxpayer money. Oh my God, this access cost taxpayers $3.8 million in fraud committed by a former worker who pleaded guilty to fraud in July 2020. If that scheme was successful, it would have netted more than $12 million. This is insane. Audit found that staffing agencies and Michigan Works agencies. I mean, this is perfectly indicative of how when I say and when we really emphasize, we have to start at the bottom and clean things up from the bottom up. I mean, this is our governor who probably gave this to, I mean, I don't even think they said here, she shuttered most of the economy, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't even say why this happened. It was either, like you said, it was either a friend of the situation, like someone she knew, like, oh, here, have this contract, like we've seen, with Biden Inc. and all that, giving his brother the contracts over there. I mean, it's, I'm hesitant to use, I don't think nepotism is the right word, but it's basically who you know. And I imagine this contract is a result of no vetting done, just, oh, I know a guy. Oh, you know a guy?
Well, a lot of this had to do with the rush on unemployment at the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay, that's fair.
We
had to outsource
structured to take on this many claims for unemployment. You remember when we were down in North Carolina, the same thing happened.
True.
Where you were told, go home, shut down. You're not allowed to see other people or interact. You have to stay by yourself in your house. We don't know what's going to happen with COVID. It was an emergency lockdown situation.
Oh boy. Sorry. I was just reading a little bit further in the article. So,
but then everybody scrambled.
Yep.
Because,
well, I mean, there was fear porn everywhere.
There was.
And the media was like, death, do it. Get your toilet paper.
I mean, to be fair, nobody knew going into it.
No. I mean, it was new. Yeah.
We were not prepared to be blindsided, which we should have, because of look at how many movies we've had about pandemics and the structural integrity of the United States and how we need to work on our infrastructure and things will crumble. We did. It was absolute panic moment. And but then everybody said, oh, well, unemployment funds.
Oh yeah, totally. Just give everybody money.
Get those. We'll float the economy until we can reopen. We'll give ourselves enough time to study this and find out how to fix it.
Yep.
Great in theory.
Yep.
But then you turn around and go, how do we siphon all this money and get it to people and make sure everything's vetted properly? When you are to that point where you're so strapped and people aren't getting responses to aid that they need immediately, and it's been 2 to 3 weeks, you hire anyone you can to get those letters out, to get people the necessary funds that they need.
Oh,
that is when horrible people step in and go,
opportunists.
Yes.
Grifters.
Yes, that's exactly what happens.
Yep.
And some of this is probably unintentional fraud. People filled out things the wrong way.
Yeah.
Because honestly, so many of us had no idea what unemployment insurance even was.
Oh, of course.
So many people had no idea how to fill out any of that paperwork.
Yeah. It's like you've never been unemployed, so how would you know?
It's a very complicated process.
It is.
And then they were changing the rules. every other week.
Seems to be their MO.
Because remember, with being an independent employee, like being a real estate agent, they don't have unemployment insurance the way companies have unemployment insurance. So then the state's still saying, well, these people still need to survive. Yep. How are we going to make this happen? And that was an industry that got hit super hard because you interact with people all day long.
No doubt. No doubt,
but it just goes to show you that in a crunch, these people that we put in leadership positions should be able to handle the panic. They should be able to step up and say, whoa, 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 whoa. The kitchen's on fire, instead of fanning the flames.
Or just sitting there like the dog meme and saying, this is fine.
Yes. Yep. You need to have a plan. You need to pull the Ansel system. You need to make sure that everybody's covered. I mean...
No. Nah.
It's bad management.
It's god-awful management.
Well, now's the point where we take this person accountable, like make them accountable, and we say, nope, you're out. Well, you're fired.
Yes. Well, I think the state's already hopefully moving that direction anyways. But Representative Steve Johnson, who is a Republican from Wayland, says he's not surprised one bit by the audit's findings and said he has no faith anything will change, barring drastic changes. At the end of the day, it's Governor Whitmer's administration, Johnson said in a phone interview. She needs to step up and fix this. This has continued to plague her administration, and we're not seeing any progress forward. So, I mean, he says, I don't know what more you can ask for. As someone who wants to commit identity theft, you've got all the information right at your fingertips. We're not asking the department to try and foresee the future and to see if any employee there might have the ability to, in the future, to do something. No, just look at their past.
That's
vetting people. That's the big thing. You've got to vet people. All right.
And you can trust people to take over and to step in and to, you know, do their fake it till you make it type mentality that we've heard so much about. But if they've done that at 3 jobs and burnt the buildings down, why would you hire them for a 4th?
Couldn't have put it better myself. Anything you want to say before we wrap it up? I think we're about there.
I think that's good for today. We covered a little bit of local, a little bit of national, what's going on with our Supreme Court nominee, which I can't wait to see more and hear more about all of that down the road.
Day 2 hearings are on now. We'll take a look at them, see what people are saying, see if there's any update with this Dick Durbin nonsense.
Yes.
And all these missing pages. But hey,
you and I need to look into some of our local candidates so we can start discussing that, because I'm very interested to see what's going on in Michigan now. We're also still keeping an eye on our friends down in North Carolina.
Of course.
Godspeed, because they've got some
they're having problems
coming up.
Well, fantastic. Well, if you like what we say here, feel free to, do that like, share, subscribe, nonsense, whatever it is you want to do. Feel free to do it. Any and all will be appreciated. If you don't like what we have to say, wow, I'm happy you made it through the entire video, and thank you.
And leave it in the comments and come on the show. We'd love to have an open, honest discussion about what your opinion is.
Yeah, very good. All right, well, everybody, have a fantastic rest of your day. We will see you tomorrow.